Nope, now we can't hear Bill.
How we doing now with our in-room echo?
I don't hear any.
We can't hear our audience yet in the Zoom attendees.
Yeah, Bill was talking and I couldn't hear him. Yep.
Patrick,
Oh,
I can hear you now, Bill.
okay, you are, someone will have to be in charge of,
there we go.
you know, the people in the room who want to speak, because I'm probably not going to be able to.
No worries.
Are we good now?
Can you hear us in there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, this will be the first time that we've tried this before. With apologies, our chair is at home and ill this evening, but he's here with us via Zoom. We are also expecting David Perrin-Chief later in the meeting as well. We have been working on a hearing for a 45-unit comprehensive permit. That's the subject of our continued hearing tonight. It's the one item that's on our agenda. There were a couple of other items, regular business items that we'll discuss after we deal with the hearing. With that being the case, we have received a letter from Attorney Dan Hill representing the abutters. Number of points that Attorney Hill has put within the letter. I have shared that with Andrew and Andrew's legal counsel. We should probably allow Dan a few moments to briefly present his correspondence, and then we can have the applicant address their responses to it. At the podium, if you would, Dan. Sure.
All right, looks like I'm out of view of the camera, but I guess that doesn't matter. My podium is vibrating too. That's a little strange.
You're in there, you're just on the edge.
Okay. Members of the board, my name is Dan Hill. I represent some of the neighbors at the Canterbrook Farm development that directly abuts the project site on Asbury Street. And I did file a letter yesterday, or I guess last night, summarizing what we think are the outstanding issues of the project. My understanding is that the board is kind of winding down the public hearing. You've received a lot of testimony and evidence from various sources, including your peer review engineers and town officials, as well as from us. And we would respectfully suggest that there are still several very key important design issues that relate to public health and the environment that should preclude the closing of this public hearing until those issues are resolved. And I'd like to briefly address those right now. Before I get into the substantive issues, I did just want to share my thoughts again on what the standard of review is in this type of application, since it's very different from anything else the the board sees on a regular basis. Under Chapter 40B, the standard of review is balancing the need for affordable housing with local concerns. And under the statute, that's defined as the need to protect the health and safety of the residents of the project as well as the residents of Hamilton, the need to promote better site and building design, and the need to preserve open spaces. That's a quote, a direct quote from the statute. The balancing test is to look at those concerns with the need for affordable housing. And one of the prevailing myths with 40B is that if a town is below the 10% threshold, that you don't have any control, that you have to approve a project, and that's simply not the case. Many towns, including the town of Manchester, incidentally, have denied Chapter 40B projects for overriding public health, safety, and environmental issues. I'm not going to tell you here tonight that I think this project needs to be denied. I don't know. I frankly don't think I don't think there's enough evidence to support a denial, and I wouldn't advocate that because I think that would be overturned. However, there are outstanding issues that I think, unless they're not addressed, could support conditions to mitigate the impacts of the project on public safety in the environment. And so those specific issues really go to the heart of the viability of the project. The first issue is the Groundwater Resource Protection District. That is a bylaw that is near and dear to Hamilton. You have private wells, as several suburbs around eastern Massachusetts have, that don't have MWRA water. Those wells are protected under your bylaws. That the bylaw that protects the wells ensures that there's a limited amount of development in the wellhead protection areas called Zone 2s. Title 5, which is a state regulation, does the same thing. They put a density cap of 440 gallons per day per acre in Zone 2s. What this applicant has done over the last couple months, after we raised this issue, is they've gone out and they've actually acquired 18 more acres to get beyond the Title V restriction, to say that they now have enough land area to meet the 440 gallons per day per acre cap under Title V. That additional 18 acres, they say, also gets them in compliance with your bylaw, which puts a limit of impervious surface of 15% of the total land area. I'm going to tell you tonight that I think that is insufficient, because the 18 acres that's been acquired is wetlands. And wetlands do not provide the same purpose of controlling and diluting wastewater as uplands do. Wetlands, as a matter of science, don't serve that purpose. Secondly, the 18 acres that are now part of the project site, they are subject to a conservation restriction. That conservation restriction precludes this land from being used for residential development. That's a question of law. And unless this applicant can give you something signed by the Essex County Greenbelt and by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs saying that it's okay, we're going to waive this conservation restriction for this project, then this project can't go forward as a matter of law, because that restriction precludes this type of use. So the first thing the board should ask the applicant after tonight is to provide proof that this land actually can be used for the purpose that the applicant is putting it to. With respect to the bylaw, I understand now the applicant is saying we're below 15%, right? So that was the issue that we raised back in September. They were over 15%, they asked for a waiver. Now they've got 18 acres and they say they're under the 15% threshold. That was one criteria under the bylaw. Another criteria is hazardous materials. Hazardous materials are prohibited within a Zone 2, within the Groundwater Resource Protection District, unless by special permit. And at first blush, you might be thinking, that maybe I'm a little crazy to suggest that wastewater is a hazardous material. It's not typically what you'd think of when you think of hazardous materials. But the definition of hazardous materials in your zoning bylaw does encompass exactly the type of thing that we're talking about here. And I'll just quote briefly. The definition is any substance or mixture of physical, chemical, or infectious characteristics posing a significant actual or potential hazard to water supplies or other hazards to human health, if such substance or mixture were discharged to land or water of the town. It's a very broad definition. And I would submit that 9,900 gallons of wastewater per day in a confined area, we're talking about essentially a 5-acre site where the building is and the leaching fields will be located, that constitutes hazardous materials for purposes of the groundwater discharge permit. And to remind everybody what 9,900 gallons is, I mean, that jug is 5 gallons. So think of it, we're talking about 9,900 gallons of wastewater in a confined area. This wastewater indisputably contains nutrients. It contains phosphorus and nitrogen. Those are proven to be detrimental to wetlands and to public health with cyanobacteria and PFAS and a load of other contaminants and pollutants. That's why we have the density restrictions under Title V. That's why we have the density restrictions under the bylaw. So I would submit that this project would otherwise require a special permit under your bylaw. This project, therefore, still needs a waiver from that bylaw. And this project should not get the waiver unless the applicant can give to you what we asked for back in September, which is a hydrogeological evaluation proving that 9,900 gallons of wastewater is not going to have a detrimental impact on the town's groundwater resources. That's the standard in your bylaw. Moving to site access. This was an issue that we raised back, I think, in July, and has actually never been addressed by the applicant. This project doesn't meet intersection site distances under the AASHTO standard. AASHTO is the green book, that's the Bible that the state uses, most towns in the Commonwealth use as the gold standard for public safety with respect to intersection safety. ISD, intersection site distance, is the site distance that a driver leaving this project needs to safely enter Asbury Street. And that's distinguishable from stopping site distance, which is the site distance that someone traveling Asbury Street needs to brake to stop, to avoid a collision. So we don't dispute that stopping site distance is met on Asbury Street. They have adequate site distance, but they don't have adequate intersection site distance. And what was troubling is that in the traffic report that was filed by the applicant didn't use the correct design speed. The applicant used 35 miles per hour in that equation. That is the speed limit. What the applicant should have used under the AASHTO standard is the 85th percentile speed, which the applicant actually calculated to be 42 to 43 miles per hour. If you use the correct design speed in calculating the intersection site distance, this project would require 382 feet of intersection site distance. That means if you're in a car at the driveway and you want to take a left or a right onto Asbury Street, you need to be able to look 382 feet in both directions in order to safely enter Asbury Street, given the speeds of traffic on Asbury Street. It's undisputed that this project site, this intersection, only has 340 feet of site distance. That's what's available. So they don't have sufficient intersection site distance under AASHTO, period. We asked for the applicant to address that a long time ago. That hasn't been addressed. And I would, again, recommend to the board that you ask for an explanation for why that's acceptable. And I'll close on the site distance issue by simply saying that AASHTO is a recognized standard such that the Housing Appeals Committee has even recognized this as a valid basis to impose conditions or even to deny a project under Chapter 40B. The Housing Appeals Committee, as you're probably very well aware, is generally not favorable to municipalities and their ability to control conditions, but they have recognized AASHTO as a safety standard. Moving to a few sort of tangential issues, not so much substantive issues, but more design issues. And these are the issues under section C of my letter. With respect to landscaping and screening, I first want to point out, in case the board hasn't noticed, the trash room, proposed trash room of the project is actually located on the east side of the building, closest to the only residential neighbors to this project, my clients who are at Cantor Brook. The trash room is designed such that containers will be rolled out onto basically the sidewalk when the trash truck comes to pick them up, empty them, and put them back. So this activity is going to happen on a regular basis. It's a noisy activity, and that is a type of activity that should be set back away from residential neighbors, not as close as possible to residential neighbors. So we would recommend and request that the applicant reorient the trash room so that that activity is in a location that can't be heard or felt by residential neighbors. Along the same vein, there is very little landscaping and buffering proposed on the east side of the property adjacent to my client's development. The applicant is assuming, because there is a setback, there's certainly a setback of maybe 80 to 90 feet, but that setback is deciduous trees. It's not dense, and those trees obviously lose their leaves half the year. So we would like the board to impose a condition or ask the applicant to revise its landscaping plan to include more robust trees buffering in that area along the property line, and to include a fence. A fence would go a long way to buffering the types of activities such as trucks, delivery vehicles, but also the lighting that comes off of this property. This is a 45-unit project that's 3 stories as perceived by the eastern abutters. There will be lights. Having a stockade fence, or not a stockade fence, I guess, a solid wood fence, a typical 6-foot fence, would mitigate those impacts. Evergreen trees would mitigate those impacts. So we'd like to see that incorporated on a landscaping plan. And then finally, we also would recommend that the board impose a condition that the project be professionally managed, and perhaps that's something the applicant was planning to do in any event. But given the scope of this project and its potential impacts on direct abutters, a professional manager is warranted. In closing, I think that the board would be well served by keeping this hearing open after tonight, to allow us, to allow the applicant, to allow other interested parties to propose conditions to the board for your comprehensive permit decision. If you close the public hearing, you can no longer receive input, as you probably know. So that would disable all of us from providing draft and proposed conditions on the permit. We also think the hearing should be open so that the applicant can provide the additional evidence and documentation that we've suggested is necessary with respect to the environmental impacts and the public safety impacts. Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Yep.
On the site distance, what are the limiting factors? Why is it only 340 feet?
I assume it's the curve in the road, so as you go up Asbury Street, the project's on the right, Asbury Street curves left, right past the driveway.
Does representative of the applicant want to respond to any of this? Or are you, I'm at a disadvantage. I see Mr. Samasco on Zoom. Are there representatives of the applicant at live?
Andrew is here with us, Bill.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Well, living
Living the dream. Indeed, sir. Indeed. Well, we're glad to be here. We have a number of items. In some measure, I want to make sure that we're addressing what the board would like addressed, either off of the comments you just heard or otherwise. By the way, I think in the previous comments, the references to the applicant, I think, means me. So I'm Andrew DeFranza from Harbor Light Housing. For those at home watching, we're a regional affordable housing nonprofit, and our goal and purpose is to make more affordable housing in the region, which is consistent with the comments that Mr. Hill mentioned about the balancing of the two different priorities. We're the affordable housing people, which I think everybody knows, but just in case. So happy to give some feedback. I would like very much, if we can, Mr. Chairman, to get you some feedback on the design updates, the lighting, and the landscape plan from Mr. Samasco, who's on Zoom, as well as we have some folks here from Hancock Engineering who can talk about the state of the septic and drainage questions and where we're going with that, which I think will address a number of the questions that were just raised. I do have some feedback from Rebecca Brown, our traffic engineer. We have some material from her, which I'm happy to read, although I can give you a brief summary of that, of my version, and Ben Timon is available to jump on Zoom if we need that for any legal discussion. So if it's okay with the chair, we would probably want to start with Mr. Samasco and talk about the design updates, the lighting plan, and the landscaping plan. I will say off the cuff, we're always interested in improvements to that, especially for the neighbors. I think the dumpster question and where that goes and managing how early or late that can be there, that's perfectly reasonable. I think that's a good one that we can do. As Mr. Hill mentioned, it is a very thick buffer in that space where we've left a lot there and are willing to improve that with evergreens. We are not interested in a stockade fence, so that's not a condition we would welcome, though I understand that that's one that he would request. So to those comments early on, but we're always happy to try to improve, which is what we did in the planning board process and in this process. Thad, can you hear me okay? Are you able to go?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
May I share my screen, okay?
Is that okay, Patrick?
Yeah.
So I'm going to step aside, Thad, and let you do your thing on the landscape plan, the lighting, and the design upgrades.
Got it. So can you all see the site plan here?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is regarding the buffer between the Canterbrook property, which is on the right side of the screen here, and the building. And as you probably are aware, there is a pretty deep tree buffer here. There are some conifers on this end of it, and it does sort of bulge in here. And our building was designed actually to come back from that line away from that. So when you look at it from the air, this is that buffer between the two properties, and you can see this sort of bulging area. And we've worked hard to maintain the grading in here so it's not to affect this buffer. This is looking at it from a different angle, but you can kind of see it coming in here. So that's the buffer we're working with. So in cross section up here, let me just see if I can get this out of the way. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in. There's a thing in the way. There it is. So in cross section, you can see this is a unit 8 at Canterbrook based on the town records we have of where the building is, and then the grade kind of comes up a bit. This is pretty much to scale that tree buffer, and here we are here. So it's pretty difficult from a human eye perspective, even here, to kind of see up and over into this building through this tree line. We did this exhibit, I think, for the planning board, where we looked at the distances, the 146 feet from the building over to our building, and the 90 feet from the property line, and also took a picture right here, because this is the critical point. I think Unit 8, Unit 7 and 6 are looking down into the woods on this corner. Unit 9 and 10 are looking past the building into the woods, and Unit 8 has, it's looking at the tangent point of the building. It's not looking right at it, but we agree that this corner right in here, if you kind of focus on this corner, is an area of concern. And we stood in that right of way, the path, and kind of took a picture, and then we superimposed where the building would be. And so there's this gap in here, and that was the gap we worked to in our landscape plan to fill, and that's this zone right in here. So there are 5 evergreens proposed in this area, along with the other deciduous trees, to help fill that gap. It's our intention to field locate these 5 trees with respect to the gap, to be sure that we take out any view through here. At the same time, we really didn't want to get into this tree line and disturb roots and so forth, more than just kind of working a little natural path through it. So we're on this side of it, working our landscape buffer. We think it will be pretty effective when we're done. So I think that's the buffer. In terms of the lighting, we're using, we do have a photometric plan, and the lighting is, there are, in terms of the lighting that is anywhere near the Canterbrook property, there's 1, 2, 3 light poles here. They're a type 3 diffuser, a lower height pole with a full cutoff. Picture looks like this, and what it does, you can see these shapes here. This is the light pattern that it throws. So the pole is here. These oblong shapes is what a type 3 diffuser does. It's meant to go lengthwise and not far forward, and certainly not far backward. And these little numbers here represent foot candles. And if you get to the property line, you can see we're down to 0.0 foot candles, 0.1. There's really no spillage over the property line of light from these fixtures. So that, I think that addresses the lighting issue. I think it addresses the screening issue. The trash issue, I think it's reasonable to say we could move the trash to the other side of the building for pickup. The story is that in this corner is in the building on the 2 floors or 3 floors is a trash room with a full compactor. It compacts the trash, so it's not like there's volumes of trash coming out of here, like a household trash, for 45 residents would have, 90 barrels of trash. The pickups would come. Yes, they're rolled out in these sort of plastic totes and picked up probably weekly, maybe semi-weekly. I mean, the hours of that pickup could be restricted to a time that would be appropriate, a daytime hour, of course, not an early morning hour. That may be the best way to address the trash issue. I think that covers the issues that Councilor Hill mentioned. Just going back a little bit, we were asked to look at the design of the building, see if there was a way to even further reduce the apparent mass of it. And to be honest with you, we thought we did a commendable job already, in that we, first of all, we took 45 units and put them in this C shape so that you never really fully appreciate this view here. You never really see that full length here, because you have the 60-degree view on either side of the center line of your eye. So really, you'd have to be on Highland Ave, rather across Asbury Street and further back, in which case all the trees would take this particular view out. So what you'd really be seeing is more when you're in the courtyard like this. And our goal was to have what would appear to be a 1-story building, a classic kind of Cape style with this lower level of clapboards, a heavy cornice line, and then using these gable forms as highlights to try to break down the mass, so that even on the ends, the double gable works to do that. So it appears almost as if it's 2 side-by-side homes. And then this form here, you might even recognize from Canterbrook, this double gable form. And then we layered it up with a shingled course here, and then the roofing there. Total height was something like 27 feet from the front here, 19, 20 feet to the east. So we kept the height quite low. And so the only thing we could think of was to highlight more of the gable forms, was to actually infill this section in here with a board and batten, more of a rural agricultural looking material to really highlight the gable. So that our proposal was to do that here. So these stretches in between now become the board and batten, so that these gables sort of stand out more. So we ran that motif around the building. And then out back, we had, I think the question was, is there a way to make it less maybe monotonous, where you have these continuous sets of double windows? And is there any other way to sort of reduce it? So we did this idea of adding the boarding across here. These taller gables, we turned them into more of a base shape, so they're not quite so tall and vertical feeling. And then we sort of reworked the window patterning to just get some more interest in the window. So it seems a little bit less like it's a continuous run, perhaps like a hotel would have, and a little bit more of a residential look. So all in all, they're fairly minor changes, but we think they're valuable changes and will help enhance the reading of the building as being as small a scale, a 45 unit, building can be, and we think it fits well in the town.
Thanks, Ted.
Sure thing.
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to see if you wanted to have you or anybody else in the room questions of Thad that were related to design or landscape design or lighting at this point before we moved over to Matthew from Hancock Associates to talk about the wastewater and drainage.
Sure.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Would it be possible for the architect to put on the screen the elevation perspective on the east side of the building that would be perceived from the neighbors in Canterbrook? And do you have a perspective through the woods that would show the height of the building from the Canterbrook side of the site?
This is the east wing here, and then remember the building angle, so you have this side here, which is this side here, as the site slopes down, and that's the door, the trash room door we're speaking of. And then it has a cant shaped like this, so this is drawn full face looking at it, but of course you're looking at it, 0.707 of that length. That's the east face. I think the photo I showed, sorry, bear with me. I mean, this is what you'd see before we put any plantings in.
And that's a picture taken in the summer, though, right?
Yes, it is, of course.
Yeah, do you have any pictures from the winter with the leaves off the trees?
I do not, no. We do think this is where those 5 conifers that are coming right in this zone are going to take that out. There are some conifers further down this end. They're on the on our side.
How wide is that tree
Citrus are
belt?
more on your side. I'm sorry?
Thad, this is Patrick. How wide is that tree belt?
It varies, Patrick, but this is 90 across, and it's a good half of it, right? 45, 40 feet.
Okay, thank you.
There's also, you can see there's this grade difference where this is kind of coming up, which helps. We think it helps.
Do you want us to wait on this at all, Mr. Chairman, or move to the next item?
Yeah, let's move on to the,
Okay. So we had some significant questions around the environmental questions. I'm going to hold the legality questions, which I'm not a lawyer, of course, as Mr. Hill is not a environmental engineer or traffic engineer, so I'm not going to speak to the legal issues specifically, but we can get Ben on the Zoom link if you'd like. We disagree, of course, with his perspective on the legal issues, but on the environmental scientific issues, thankfully, we do have an engineer here. So this is Matthew Connors from Hancock Engineering, and he's going to run you through some of our responses and also some of the updates that were, of course, not a part of a response to yesterday's letter, but were things we've been working on for a few months. Matthew?
Good evening. My name is Matt Connors. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Massachusetts. So in response to a lot of the questions of on the environmental piece, we meet the regulation is really what it comes down to. We're in the process of working with the board.
Mind moving closer to the mic? You're a pretty tall dude.
Mic doesn't come up. I'll move down. Yeah. So so we're working with the town's Board of Health. We've received some comments. We have no issues in responding to any of those comments. We've added, since the last hearing with the Board of Health, we have added a sand filter, which takes care of the nitrogen loading as required under the state code, Title V. And we have been asked to provide basically groundwater in the springs, so we're in the process of installing some wells to get some better information for the Board of Health. It's really where we stand at this point. We have no issues with any of the comments and from the Board of Health, and there is no real issue with even responding to any of their questions. So in conclusion, we meet the regulations as stipulated by the town and by Title V.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
has our peer reviewer, where does that stand in terms of the peer reviewer reviewing the septic issue?
Let me check with Eric.
Hi, Patrick. Eric Carlson here.
Hi.
Also, Steve Sawyer is with me, and you might want to make him a panelist. Steve should probably speak to these. This is his discipline.
Okay. They're both good to go now.
Steve, you want to address that question?
Yeah. Yes. So we reviewed the septic, and we concur with the sand filter. Included as part of the design. It meets the regulations. It fully complies with the regulations as far as Title V concerns.
Thank you, Stephen and Eric.
Let me just ask, so Attorney Hill raised the issue that the additional 18 acres is significant, primarily wetlands. Is your conclusion the same?
No, well, so Title V allows, what doesn't count is land underwater. So if it was a lake, it wouldn't count. But wetlands they are part of the contribution area as part of the aggregate land, aggregation of land. And in my understanding, it's a wooded wetland area.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Andrew.
So there was 2 other points raised, I think, that might be reasonable to comment on, that you might want some information on. One of them is about the professional management, which we agree with is a critical issue. Harbor Light manages all our own buildings across the region, and we would manage this one. So not only is it professionally managed, but the development organization and the management organization are the same. So essentially, we're on the hook for the duration. And I think, as everybody probably knows, I live 5 miles from here, so on the hook in the fullest of senses. So that is fine, and we agreed to that, and it would be fine for that to be a condition, at least in our view. That would be acceptable. I do have a message here from Rebecca Brown related to the traffic question and the sight line. My layman interpretation of her message, which I'm happy to read, including the references to AASHTO, as Mr. Hill mentioned. is that we will be able to comply with the requirements of AASHTO, and it will require the removal of some trees on our area, and it would be fine if what you wanted to know was us to submit the plan that tagged which trees would need to be removed to make it so that we would comply with the distance. So that interpretation was mine of what Rebecca had said, and she confirmed that that is in fact accurate. So we would be willing to remove those trees to comply with that. She has about a 2 or 3 paragraph message here, which I'm happy to read, chock full of interesting technical references if you should wish. Would you like me to read that, Mr. Chairman? I see you're curious. It's about, it's 4 paragraphs.
Is that something you could submit to us?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm happy to submit that for the record. But in all cases, we are in agreement with Mr. Hill that we would need to comply with that. We can comply with it, and we would be fine to submit as a condition the plan that demonstrates that we would be in compliance. In addition, if it's by way of feedback, we also would we would welcome a condition that noted we had to comply with Title V. As Matthew referenced, we will, but we are going to engage in the well activity that the Board of Health requested us to do in the spring, and if that is a condition of a permit, that's also perfectly reasonable and acceptable. And I believe those were the issues raised. The main ones we were planning to come to before the letter late last night was the updates to the Title V planning as it relates to the increase in land, which was the way we tried to make sure we could comply and respect and honor both the substance and the legality of the questions around Title V, and also the updates on the design of the building, which was in response to feedback I think we received from this board previously. Those were the 2 main things we were going to say, but we wanted to make sure we responded to questions that were coming up and any others that you might have at this time. And I will forward the message from Rebecca to Patrick for your record.
Okay. Okay, so that's it from you, Mr. DeFranza?
That's it from me, Mr. Chairman, unless there's other things you'd like from me or from Matthew or from Thad. Also, if you would like to talk about the legality questions, Ben Timon is available. I would have to text him and he'll get on the Zoom call if you would like that.
Well, I think, my position was when this was first raised was that this really isn't, this was somewhat based on advice of special counsel, Mr. Pucci, that this really isn't our issue. The Essex County Greenbelt had waived the conservation restriction with respect to the 5 acres, I assume, or can I assume that they have with respect to the 18 acres?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the language, but if what you mean is did they update their original letter to reference the larger landmass, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I can get it for you. Yeah, I thought we did. Maybe not.
Are there any questions at this point from the members of the board?
That last part there, does that mean that the Essex County Greenbelt no longer holds the conservation
No, that's not what it means.
on the 18 acres?
No, so the nuance from Greenbelt was that that they were allowing us to build essentially in the restricted area some of the septic system that was going to service the building that was on our land. All of it had to be contiguous, meaning the kicker was it had to be under common ownership, so we structured the ownership to do that. That was for the original smaller piece, the 4 or 5 acre piece. So when we increased the land mass, essentially their reality didn't change because the building didn't move and the septic system didn't move. But they to make it clear, they affirmed again, yes, this updated version is is still fine, because the interpretation we wanted was, do they understand it to be within their conservation restriction rights, that as long as the land is under contiguous ownership, that we could put septic equipment under the ground, essentially in conservation land? And the answer to that was yes, both when the smaller land mass and the larger land mass. The project didn't change location or size with the larger land mass, so it had no impact on their view of the situation. That's what I understand. But we have that letter updated from them and can submit that for the record. You're welcome.
Mr. Hill had suggested that we not close the public hearing. I guess, speaking just for myself, I have 2 points. First, I don't think that's something that at this point that is within the control of the board. We've extended a couple of times at the agreement of the applicant, and I think we could only extend again if the applicant agreed to. Also, and I think most of the things that are raised in Mr. Hill's letter, a number of which are certainly legitimate issues, are issues that could be dealt with, probably would be dealt with conditions if we voted to approve this. So speaking just for myself, I think I would be in favor of closing the hearing, but I'm not suggesting we vote on that at this moment. Are there any, Patrick, are there any people, can you help me out here a little, people in the, in real life that would like to speak to this?
One of the things that I had contacted Andrew about, and I know was a big issue, for abutters, and I think one of the important things that you try to do with higher density projects like this is that you try to improve pedestrian conditions. And we had discussed the possibility of the project contributing to the construction of a sidewalk from the mouth of their driveway to assisting the town to the intersection of Asbury with Highland. That would certainly be helpful for future residents, helpful for residents that live in that part of town right now as well. That was one of the things that had come up time and time again as part of the design review and discussion with the planning board. I guess that's been about 1.5 years ago.
Bill, I'm just looking at going through the regulations, and like you said, what I found was 10.6.6, which is way down in the hearing, since we're still in the 65 days of closure. The public hearing shall constitute approval of the site plan. So I guess we haven't fully finished the approval process, is because we're still kind of batting a few things around. So,
well, I think, and George Pucci, is he there, or is he online, or?
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Perhaps you could, assuming we close the public hearing, perhaps you could just outline what would happen then, how things would.
Sure. If you, first of all, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. George Pucci from KP Law. Good to be with you tonight. Yeah, if you close the hearing tonight, you'll have 40 days to issue the decision. Attorney Hill is correct. If you close the hearing tonight, there are no more submissions that can come in. So if the board thinks that they have some unanswered questions, they wanted some more information, that could not occur after tonight. The additional submissions that were referenced tonight, those are part of the record now. They were referenced and part of this record before you close the hearing. But, you know, it's pretty much a cutoff after tonight. And as you pointed out, Mr. Chair, the applicant is in control at this point. They had agreed to extend the public hearing. So without an agreement from the applicant, you're not able to continue it beyond tonight. You would need to close and then issue that, deliberate on a decision within your 40-day window. In the event that you were to do that, I would work with Patrick to prepare a draft. I would like to hear some maybe consensus from the board about which way you're leaning on it. And then if you're leaning toward an approval with conditions, that's the draft that I would put together, a draft approval with conditions. And then what I would do is submit that to Patrick. He would provide that to you in advance of your deliberations, and then you could deliberate on that publicly. It's a public meeting, but again, you can't take further feedback from third parties of the applicant at that point. It would just be strictly limited to the board to deliberate on the draft decision, discuss it, and any further changes that they might want to make on it. You'd go ahead and vote that, and then it would subsequently get filed with the town clerk.
Okay, thanks. So I'd ask my colleagues, are there open questions that you still want answered first? And secondly, you know, are you, you know, ready to make a straw vote on some sort of a decision? So, who wants to start?
So I'm just going through Attorney Hill's letter they submitted that came in. So from what I gathered from the meeting, the questions from his letter to the zoning board have all been answered this evening. Is that safe to say that they've all been answered?
Okay. Okay. Andy?
One question I had was, how many times does the trash get picked up? That was one question that Attorney Hill was asking, or had mentioned that it would be disruptive for the neighbors. And if it's one time a week, like all regulars.
Is it okay for me to answer that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we would expect a weekly trash pickup, and we would welcome a condition that said it would not before such and such an hour or not after such and such an hour. And we're also, yeah, we're fine with that as parameters. We couldn't specify at 8 o'clock a.m. kind of a thing, but once a week within a certain parameter is understandable, and we're fine with that.
Okay, and
I had a quick question. Do you have other projects that are this large that you're managing now?
We do, and larger, and smaller, unfortunately, but yes.
But
Yeah.
you're finding that that's just once a week is sufficient?
Yeah, because it's
Say once, maybe twice a week.
certainly if you're going to condition it and you want to go twice, that's better for us. But that's why you use the compactor, is to try to handle. You're trying to compress that
Minimize it, yeah.
over time. My recollection everywhere now is that we're generally on a weekly haul, and that's how we'd like to do it. But certainly, yeah, if you want to make it 1 to 2, that's fine with us.
No, I just want to make sure it doesn't creep up,
Yeah,
you know, just because you just can't do it once a week
right.
without 4 trucks lining up.
Yeah, you'd have to. Yeah, you got to go up or out. So that would apply. Yes.
I'd only add that there's a dedicated recycling chute and compactor, so it's possible that that's not the same truck at the same hour. But part of that is why the trash it's only needs picked up once a week. There's a pretty strong recycling and composting program on these that's put into place for these units.
Yeah, and I would not think about that in the same way to the question that you just asked. I'm assuming you mean the dumpsters,
Yeah,
the compactors,
yeah.
right? But that it could all apply to ours, like any kind of pickup. That could apply actually generally if it was helpful to the neighbors. essentially truck activity after a certain time.
And Mr. Simasco, I believe you indicated that it would be feasible and not onerous to flip the trash to the other side of the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, depends on one's definition of onerous, but yes, feasible. Andrew, I'm not sure how you feel about that, but it's feasible.
Yeah, I think we pretty much live in the space between feasible and onerous. That's exactly like our sweet spot. So that seems to be consistent with the rest of our interests and behavioral functioning.
Okay.
Bill, I recognize I'm not a voting member in this.
Yeah, no,
But for what it's worth, I agree with your previous statement of it feels like you could move forward with conditions that we would all discuss at a later date.
Okay, thanks. Stephen, anything you want to,
I don't have any
any
specific
questions you
questions.
have or anything you want to?
No specific questions, but I do agree that we could close and move on with discussion at a later date.
Okay. Do you agree, in agreement with that, Bruce and David?
I agree.
Yes, I am, I would like to see a plan, the landscape plan soon, very soon, and definitely get the traffic report and distance stuff ironed out, because I think that seems to be a sticking point. Just make sure we're clear there.
Oh, and the updated
Sounds like we're
picture
good
with
with the
a winter
septic.
picture.
Say that again?
The winter picture that was brought up, so pictures of from where the summer picture was taken with the greenery, a winter picture so we can see what it looks like now, so that if we have to adjust the
Planting scheme.
plantings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding the trees impeding sight distance on Asbury, Asbury is a scenic roadway in Hamilton, has been for many, many years. It is possible to remove trees for safety conditions, whether they're rotted or visually in the way. It would simply mean that the applicant would need to conduct or be part of a scenic roadway hearing with the planning board to do the necessary tree clearance in the way if that's found to be necessary.
All right, is Harbor Lights okay with that?
Well, I guess,
Yeah, that we would be agreeable to that, and both that and the winter picture, both, we'd be agreeable to both those.
the apple, Mr. Hill.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a couple of really short comments on this question of closing the hearing. My advice, for what it's worth, is it sounds like you could keep this hearing open with the applicant's consent for one more session to get this additional information that the applicant is agreeing to provide. And I also think it's really worthwhile for you to get feedback from the applicant as well as us on the draft conditions, and Mr. Pucci can maybe speak to that, but in my experience working in other communities, I think boards are often, they often benefit from having proposed conditions to look at from the different viewpoints, and then they can decide which ones they like and which ones they don't like. So I think my clients are very happy to have me propose draft conditions that you can consider. I'm sure the applicant would have draft conditions that they'd like to propose as well. So I would recommend, or perhaps ask the applicant if they would agree to keep the hearing open for one more session so we can have this additional information brought in and the conditions proposed.
Any response, Mr. DeFranza? I guess
Yeah, I think our response would be if the members of the committee feel comfortable as they seem like they've described, we're happy to close the hearing and move ahead.
Okay, I sense that we're ready to take a vote on closing the hearing. The voting members on this will be myself, Bruce Gingrich, and David Parent-Chief. Because we're on Zoom, this will be a roll call vote. So first, is there a motion to close the hearing on the proposed 40B at 440 Asbury Street?
Motion to close the hearing on 440B Asbury Street.
Okay, moved by David Parent-Chief. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Bruce Gingrich.
We lost you,
lost
Bill.
him.
Can't hear you.
Bill, you got very quiet.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
David
That's better.
Parent-Chief,
Aye.
Bruce Gingrich,
Aye.
Bill Bowler, aye. Okay. The public hearing is closed. Thank you all. This will, of course, be on our next February 1st meeting to discuss a draft decision, which I think you can assume is approval with conditions. We do have some minutes to approve quickly. The November minutes, I think that was myself, David, and Bruce. Is there a motion to approve the December minutes, or the November minutes? I'm sorry.
Now motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded for discussion. All those in favor, roll call vote. David?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Bill Bowler? Aye. Okay, and the December minutes, which were very short, was just continuing the hearing, and I believe that was myself, Bruce Gingrich, and Andy, or was it Stephen? I don't have the minutes in front of me.
I haven't looked at them, but my memory is it was me.
Okay, then, so it was me, Bruce, and Stephen. So is there a motion to approve the December minutes?
Now motion to approve.
Moved by Bruce Gingrich. Is there a second?
I'll second to approve. Stephen DeRocher?
Okay. Discussion, not, roll call vote. Excuse me. Stephen DeRocher,
Aye.
Bruce Gingrich,
Aye.
Bill Bowler, aye. Okay, that's
Super.
all. That's all we have, I believe. I can see my cat behind me, very attentive.
Yes.